Hi, how's everyone out there doing today? This is Amy Hamilton, author of The Project Manager, Life is a Project, and The Consummate Communicator, Character Traits of True Professionals. I am so honored to be here with the very charming John C. Alexander as part of my 24 Authors in 12 Hours marathon. He wrote this book. The journey begins with 1,000 miles, and this book really has to deal a lot with Parkinson's disease, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. And also, there is unfortunately many veterans who suffer from this. And John, now that I have given this introduction, I really want you to kind of share your story, your experience about your book. And I know that you have a lot to say. I will be putting your Amazon link as well as the link for your charity into the comments. And thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thank you for having me, Amy. I really appreciate that. Yeah, definitely have a lot to talk about because I was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease about 11 years ago. And so it's already been a bit of a ride, but no pun intended with my title. But yeah, when you're first diagnosed with something like that, it's pretty shocking, and it causes you to wonder about a number of things. Am I going to get better? Am I going to be able to support my family? Am I going to be able to work? Am I going to die? And so I did some extensive research when I first was diagnosed, and that simply means that I read Michael J. Fox's book called Lucky Man, and obviously he's known for his optimism, and that's what shines through a lot in the books that he's written. He's got a new one coming out in about 2 weeks. Anyway, there were two things that I took from his book. One is you don't die from Parkinson's, you die with it. And the second is that it's a boutique disease. So what do those two things mean? The first is that Parkinson's is not like an aggressive form of cancer where, some 6 months and that's it. For many people, it can be a long haul that you live with this condition. And I know people who've lived with it for 20, 30, 40 years. And the good news is that people can actually live well with Parkinson's if they follow a few simple guidelines. And the boutique is that most people think of the tremors or, individuals who are hunched over a bit, and that is often the case. But there's a myriad of symptoms for Parkinson's, and they're different for every single person. So whatever cocktail you end up getting, that's what you get, and you have to deal with, and that changes over time. But one of the things I learned very quickly was that exercise is actually just as important as any medication that you take, as it is in a lot of conditions, but it particularly is in Parkinson's, and there's been a lot of research to that effect. So I dusted off my old bicycle and immediately crashed. I'm kind of good at that. And I decided I better need to learn to do that a little bit better. And I took part in a class. I live in Orlando, Florida. Took part in a class here called Cycling Savvy, which by far is the best bike skills handling class for anyone in the country, and it's spreading around the country quite rapidly. But what that did is it gave me the comfort and confidence to ride whenever and wherever I wanted, meaning riding in traffic. The day of our class, they had us out riding a 6-lane highway right through the middle of town. And if that doesn't, get you shooken up a little bit, nothing will. So I started then riding, small rides, going to some group rides and picking up. And then someone told me about an event called Ride with Larry. And the Larry they're speaking of is a person named Larry Smith, who at the time had been living with Parkinson's for over 22 years. He lived in South Dakota, and he decided he wanted to do something really big before it was too late. And so he set up to do a 300-mile ride across his state and invited people to come in. And I said, okay, that's a direct invitation to me. And so my son and I went up to South Dakota, did the last day of the ride, which is a 65-mile ride. And as I prepared for that, had to get some miles in and ride a bit more. And that was a phenomenal day. That ended up being a movie which became the most inspirational movie that's ever been done about Parkinson's. And I definitely suggest that people, check that out at some point. And actually, to their credit, one of the things that was featured in the movie was talking about medical marijuana. And many of you probably have even seen the clip on that. And that fact that they put that in that film actually helped medical marijuana to pass in South Dakota this year, obviously just a week ago. But the By the time I'd prepared for and done the ride with Larry, I'd ridden 500 miles. And so I thought, well, I guess I should keep doing it a little bit more. And I kept doing other rides and group rides, and had one friend who I told him about, that I had set a goal for 1,000 miles. He said, well, I'll definitely help you get there. And so the very last day when we were going to do another 30, 40-mile ride to cap things off, he showed up and he brought a friend with him, which was pretty significant. His friend was a former Marine who arrived in a crimson red cycling jersey with Semper Fi on both sides. And so those were my two wingmen. And when I crossed that threshold, and it's funny, I still look back and it still kind of gets to me. But, it was, I did that because I wanted to show to myself that there was more that I could do than I thought I could do, and to be prepared for what might come with a Parkinson situation. I did a few other activity type things at that point. I have a friend who lives in Scotland, and he'd climbed all the mountains in Scotland, over 280 of them. And I said, I just want to go up one. So my friend invited me to come to Scotland, and we did a mountain called Ben Ann. And standing on the top of that mountain was, a tremendous feat, because it wasn't just the physical accomplishment. It was, it was really almost a spiritual kind of movement. And when they say that in Scotland, if you're at the top of a mountain, you're right on God's doorstep. So it was a fantastic event. My daughter then, after the bike riding, said, why don't we do a triathlon? Okay, sounds like fun. So we knocked a couple of those off. But the disease does progress, and things continued. I worked for a number of years after my diagnosis, and that all went well. But I came to the realization that there were three things that I could control myself, and those included activity, inspiration, and advocacy. Well, the activity I've described already, and I wish I could say that I did, that I do all the exercise I should do every day. Don't we all? But we can aspire to that. But the inspiration, I started looking around. So I talked about someone like, Larry Smith, but there's so many other people I've met. A lot of people think of Parkinson's, they think of, like an old man's disease. Well, one, yes, the majority of people are diagnosed with Parkinson's around age 60, 65. But there are a number of people now who have what's called young onset Parkinson's, where they're diagnosed when they're 40, 30, 20, even in their teens. And that's changing because I think a lot of it is the fact that Parkinson's, some can be genetic, but often it's environmental. And so many people are exposed to toxic substances that they don't even know that they're exposed to, and that can cause them to develop the Parkinson's disease. The other thing though is I started realizing there's people doing way more than I was doing. I've got some friends who have been on American Ninja Warrior. I've got one friend who won the first season of the Amazing Race Canada with his son. Other people who've done all kinds of accomplishments. One gal out in Arizona who's done 100 marathons. So some of these people, you just can't tie them down. The good news is they often do it for their preferred charity. But I also realized that this is the only race here is the race against yourself, and the race to take care of yourself and make yourself do well and do better. But I also became inspired by one group in particular, and that's called the Davis Phinney Foundation. And the Davis Phinney Foundation was founded by Davis Phinney, who was an Olympic cyclist. He was actually the winningest American cyclist of all time, and won stages of the Tour de France. And he was diagnosed with Parkinson's just after his 40th birthday, and he had to give up his cycling. And he decided he would create a foundation to focus on helping people to live well with Parkinson's. And one of the things that he does, or the group does, is to provide a tremendous amount of information for people who have Parkinson's. And they have a book called the Every Victory Counts Manual, which is available for free from the Davis Phinney Foundation. And I highly suggest that anyone who either has the condition or knows of someone who may have the condition, that they consider picking up a copy of that. Just it's for free, just to write to the organization or go to their website. And so, in addition to being inspired by other people to continue on and push, I started having people tell me that they were inspired by me. Well, that's humbling, certainly, and I guess appreciated. But you have to kind of learn to understand and get a hold of a comment like that, because it is meant very sincerely. And I didn't feel that any more than after I had published the book. There was an event that took place last year in Kyoto, Japan, called the World Parkinson Congress. It takes place only every 3 years. And my book was chosen by that group to be featured in what they call their book nook. And so that was an honor in itself, along with several other people that have done excellent books on the topic. But there was one woman in particular from Barbados I've never met, but she did a poster talking about when she was diagnosed. She couldn't find anything but hard, complicated articles to read, nothing that lifted her up. And so she started looking for books that were inspirational and made her feel better about herself and want to continue on the journey. And mine was one of the books that she featured on that article. So I felt really great about that, and that I could do something. So I feel that that's a huge responsibility, and I take it very seriously. And I do want to make it possible for other people to benefit from what I've learned. I've always had a heavy dose of optimism myself. In fact, the subtitle of my book is Thriving with Hope, Optimism, and Perseverance. And it does take all of those to keep going, even when things get a little bit difficult. In 2016, my condition had changed to the point that I was taking more medication. And there's a fine line between the right amount of medication and too much, where you can actually have more symptoms by taking medication. So what I decided to do with my medical team was to have a procedure done called deep brain stimulation. It's like a pacemaker for the brain. And what it does is it interrupts a specific area in the brain that can have a tremendous effect on controlling some of the symptoms, which for me were the tremor, the usual tremor that you've seen people have, which made it difficult to hold some things. Rigidity, which is like a stiffness and challenge in fine motor skills, and some dystonia, which is kind of takes over some of your muscles and tightens them up and makes it hard to function. The procedure was fantastic, and it worked extremely well for me. And I was also able to cut my medication way down. So it's not an instant cure. It's not a cure by any means. If I turn the device off, tremors come back. But when I have it on and I have my right counter of medication, I feel fantastic and can do just about anything I've always done. So that's phenomenal. And the things I like to do include the writing and certainly speaking. I love getting in front of groups and sharing this and really talking about. I may have heard this a couple times with other speakers today, talking about resilience and talking about realizing what your challenge might be and going for overcoming it. As I mentioned, the third area that I've talked about is advocacy. And that starts with a couple different areas. The first is self-advocacy, and that is learning to build a team that can help you to be your best. So that includes your medical team, it includes your friends and family, it includes whatever is your support group, and have those available to help you reach your milestones and your plateaus. The next, and also speaking up for what you need when you need it. The next area of advocacy is the area of clinical trials. And in a condition like Parkinson's, it's so important to have research ongoing that provides more information. And I participated in a number of clinical trials to benefit the group. I've even gone so far as I've already signed the paper to donate my brain so that it can be studied to help understand what took place in my lifetime to help other people in the future. But the last part of advocacy is the little more traditional, which is the public advocacy. And I've participated for the last 2 years through the Michael J. Fox Foundation. They've invited me to be a delegate and go to Washington, D.C. And last September had that privilege, and we visited with our elected officials in Capitol on Capitol Hill. And there are several things that we were talking about. One, we were explaining the economic burden of Parkinson's disease, which is over $55 billion per year. It's with a B. And that about half of that is medical costs, and the other half are things like lost work, lost employment, having to get extra care, paying for care support, etc. And the idea is that if less people had this condition, that would ultimately be a savings to our entire nation. There is a book that's out by 4 excellent authors called Ending Parkinson's. Again, another good read that explains very clearly the reasons that the disease exists and what can be done to help prevent it, and basically take a pact to work to get rid of this in our lifetime. But I mentioned environmental issues that can be a factor in Parkinson's, and this is where there definitely is a tie-in for veterans. Agent Orange, most people know, had a huge impact on causing Parkinson's for many veterans. And fortunately, with the work of a number of people over the years, that's been supported so that the care of that is covered by the Veterans Administration. And the other areas that have popped up have been ones where there's been toxic leaks into areas, and the in the groundwater and what have you, and that's what I was trying to find. The Superfund sites have been created. One of those was at Camp Lejeune, where not only were the service people who had volunteered to be part of this, but literally their families and their children were living in areas where, who knows, they could come down with Parkinson's, they could come down with various forms of cancers. And so there has definitely been a lot of work done by groups to make sure that these sites get cleaned up, that the funding is there for research. One of the things we did 2 years ago was to petition for more funding for the Department of Defense research on Parkinson's, because that had slipped from about $25 million a year to about 16. So I think we've got that back up to the proper level again. I've got one friend who served in the Air Force. His job was refueling the SR-71 Black Hawk. And so, laying on his stomach at the back of a plane, putting the nozzle into that phenomenal, piece of aircraft, there were, naturally some of the fuel that, splashed over him. And there's a particular component of that called cesium, which has been proven to cause Parkinson's. That, along with living on 2 bases, which were near, toxic areas, that wasn't good either. Now, I mentioned last year we went up to, so I definitely would suggest that any veteran who has symptoms of Parkinson's, get it checked out. And the best person to do that is called a movement disorder specialist. And I believe that most of the VA hospitals have those individuals on staff. It's a neurologist who has more years of advanced training specifically in Parkinson's. And again, get the Every Victory Counts book from Davis Finney. I wanted to kind of close with one quick story. When I went to DC last year for the Parkinson Policy Forum, had a little time the first day that we got there, and I went over to Arlington with some of my friends, and we toured it. And it certainly was impressive and moving, as I'd always thought it would be. As we were walking up to the area of the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, I got a FaceTime call from my granddaughter, who was 8 years old at the time. And I said, we talked for a couple minutes, but I said, well, I'm going to go see this, the changing of the guard. And she said, well, what's that? And I said, well, I'll tell you what, I can't talk anymore, but I'll let you watch it. And she watched the performance, and she was truly impressed. Well, a few months later at her school, they did a U.S. Living history program. And while most of the kids were doing things like dressing up as the Statue of Liberty or someone on Mount Rushmore, my granddaughter Lily decided to share what she learned about the honor guards at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. So she and her mom, my daughter, put together a little costume for her. She had a little wooden rifle. She even made and colored herself a little badge to wear. They got a yoga mat out, and Lily had learned all about the process and the 21 steps and the turn and what the how they even move their feet, etc. And she put on a performance, and I thought that was pretty cool. So I picked up the phone and I called the honor guards offices and just told them about that. And they said, well, send us some pictures. And I did. And they were amazing. The regimental commander sent her a letter. And along with the letter was a certificate of appreciation, along with 2 challenge coins specifically from the honor guard. And then the local magazine ended up featuring it too. But in addition to that, they gave her a new nickname, which was the Littlest Sentinel. So I bring that up just to say that the future is good. There's young people who care, even if they're just 8 years old at the time. And I say happy Thanksgiving. Well, that too, that's coming up as well. But happy Veterans Day to all of you. And appreciate you giving me time to provide you with a little information and advocacy about Parkinson's disease, and wish you all well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. A lot of information that you put out there. And one of the things I wanted to do real quick is that part of today, or all day today, my books are available for a free download on Kindle. But any of the print books that are sold today, 10% of those books are going to be donated to the Wounded Warrior Project, which I just put in the chat. John, as you went through, I put links to movie references, books in the chat. So if people want to go through those chat sessions. The other thing is for reaching John Alexander. If you go to John Alexander Talks, which is scrolling across the screen right now, and you can find out more information about him, about Parkinson's disease, about what you can do for advocacy for Parkinson's disease. So many great points that you brought up today. Unfortunately, these segments just go by so super fast. And so before I close out, I do want to ask, is there any additional comments, anything else that you wanted to add that you didn't get a chance to talk about today?
I think I pretty much hit the high points. I knew that it's been a long day for you, Amy, so I hope you don't mind me just kind of rambling on. I tend to do that. I've always said, why use one word when 5 will do? Which I actually learned one recently that Theodore Roosevelt also said that. Now the other thing is that I did work with a different book coach than your group. Most of your group does. I work with Amy Collette, and I want to give her a shout out. I know you're friends, and she has a group called Positively Powered Authors, and a couple of the folks who were on the program last month, Aaron Bear and Jody Hopkins, also work with Amy. But it's fantastic to have someone like that to work with. And from the time we had our...
And also one of the other authors today, Barry Overton, who was featured this morning. Yeah, so yeah, exactly. So super awesome, amazing group for Amy, and do want to give Positively Powered Authors a shout out. As we go through this journey of becoming authors, one of the things that we've talked about a lot today is the importance of having a community. And John, I'm so happy to be a part of this journey with you. And once again, this is John's book, The Journey Begins with 1,000 Miles. And thank you so much for sharing this, and such an important message to share to our audience. Our next author is super exciting, Kenneth Katz. And what Kenneth did was, he is an Air Force officer, but his books are about the behind the scenes, the engineering on some of these amazing aircraft. So we're going to be talking about that next.
And thank you, Amy. I
John,
appreciate it.
thank you so much.
Okay, now.